I was 2 glasses of champagne into my father's retirement party when my stepmother stood up, tapped the side of her wine glass with a dessert spoon, and smiled at the room the way people smile when they know everyone is watching. "I want to say something," she announced. "Tonight is about Carlton and about family, his real family." She let the pause stretch just long enough. Then her eyes settled on mine, briefly, deliberately, the way someone checks a clock before making a point. "Damon, Giselle, come stand with your father for a photo." My stepbrother pushed back his chair without hesitation. My stepsister rose, smoothing her dress, and slipped her arm through my father's. My father, who had been sitting 2 seats to my left, let himself be arranged between them without a word. I was at the same table. Nobody asked me to stand up. The photographer clicked. My father smiled. My stepmother beamed. I sat holding a fork I didn't remember picking up, watching the 3 of them compose themselves into a family portrait that had never included me and never would. Before I tell you what happened after that night, drop something in the comments. Where are you watching from? And if you've ever sat at a table full of people and felt completely invisible, you already know exactly what I was feeling right then. My father, Carlton Harmon, remarried when I was 9. My mother had died 3 years before, a sudden cardiac event while she was jogging on a Thursday morning. She was 34. My father grieved in the way some men grieve, quietly, and then by replacing the silence with something new. Her name was Linda. She came with 2 children. My stepbrother, Damon, who was 11, and my stepsister, Giselle, who was 7. My father sat me down on the edge of his bed one evening and told me we were going to be a real family now, that Linda already loved me, that things were going to be good. I believed him. I was 9 years old. The first year had its moments. Linda made pancakes on Saturday mornings. My stepbrother let me watch TV in his room sometimes. My stepsister and I shared a bathroom and occasionally a laugh. There were brief, ordinary stretches where it seemed like my father might actually be right. But cracks don't announce themselves. When I was 12, my father's college friend got married in Arizona. Linda organized the trip. Herself, my father, my stepbrother, my stepsister. When I reached for my overnight bag, she stopped me with a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Oh, sweetheart, this one's just the 5 of us. You'll be fine at the Marshalls next door." I nodded. I packed a different bag. I walked next door and didn't cry until I was inside someone else's house. That was the first time I was left behind for a family event. It was a long way from the last. There were Christmas trips I was excluded from because the cabin only sleeps so many. There were the summers my stepbrother and stepsister were enrolled in camps and enrichment programs while I was told the budget was stretched. There were small things that accumulated the way small things do. Their report cards on the refrigerator. Their drawings framed on the hallway wall. My own achievements acknowledged briefly. And filed away somewhere I couldn't find them. I redirected all that, wanting into the only thing I could control. I studied harder than anyone around me. I graduated high school with a 4.1 GPA. I researched and applied for scholarships without help. Sitting at the kitchen table late at night, filling out applications while my father and stepmother watched television in the next room. I earned enough to cover most of my first year at a university 4 states away. My stepbrother enrolled at a local school on what I later learned was a complete parental payment plan. Tuition, room, board, meal plan, parking pass, no paperwork, no part-time job, no questions asked. My stepsister followed the same path 2 years after him. I worked 40 hours a week at a campus cafe during my junior and senior years to bridge what my scholarships didn't reach. I graduated with a finance degree and a work ethic that belonged entirely to me. Within 3 years, I was a senior analyst at a logistics company, helping mid-sized businesses restructure their operations. I was good at it in a way that surprised even me. Within 5 years, I had launched my own consultancy. 3 staff, a solid client roster, a reputation for being the person companies called when the numbers stopped making sense. I built every bit of it from scratch. Nobody handed me a single brick. During those same years, my father's HVAC contracting business was quietly collapsing. He hadn't adapted to a changing market. He lost clients steadily. By the time I was 26, he and my stepmother had extended the mortgage on the family home twice. When he finally called me, not to ask how I was, but to ask if I could help, I didn't hesitate. I transferred him $60,000 over 18 months. My accountant structured it as a formal loan. My father signed the paperwork. He mentioned, almost in passing, that it would be better if Linda didn't know the full amount. It would only cause her stress. I kept quiet. That was the kind of daughter I was. My stepbrother's bar and grill opened around the same time with enormous confidence and almost no business foundation. By the 3rd quarter, it was bleeding money. He called me one morning before 7. His voice scraped thin in a way I hadn't heard before. "I don't know who else to call," he said. I wired him $47,000 across 2 transfers over 8 months. He said he'd pay me back. I drafted documentation. He never signed it. My stepsister's wedding was a production. Her fiancé Beckford came from old money and had the specific kind of condescension that travels well in formal settings. When the venue cost came in $19,000 over budget, my father called and said they were considering asking her to scale back. He sounded genuinely miserable. I covered the shortfall. I told my stepsister it was a wedding gift. She said thank you and moved on to the seating chart. And then there was the lake house in the Carolinas, a property my stepmother had insisted on buying during a good quarter. Mortgaged jointly, with my name on the deed, because my credit was the strongest of all of them. I paid my share every month for 4 years. Just over $1,000 a month, for a house I visited once each summer. For long weekends during which I was given the smallest bedroom. And was left behind at least once per trip because the boat didn't fit everyone. I kept paying. That was the kind of person I'd made myself into. If you add it all together, the loan to my father, the money to my stepbrother, the wedding shortfall, the lake house payments, the smaller emergencies scattered across a decade, the number climbs past $230,000. I avoided doing that math for a long time. Knowing the exact figure felt like it would require me to have an opinion about it. And I wasn't ready for that. My father's retirement party was held in a private dining room, at a steakhouse downtown, 40-something guests, open bar, a slideshow my stepmother had assembled of my father's life, his Georgia childhood, his early contracting work, his wedding to Linda, my stepbrother and stepsister as babies, family vacations, holidays, summers at the lake house. I appeared in exactly 2 photographs. In both of them, I was at the edge of the frame, half out of the shot, like I'd wandered into someone else's picture. I arrived early with a card and a bottle of his favorite bourbon. He held on a little longer than usual when he hugged me at the door, and I let myself think maybe this night would be different. It wasn't. The toast came at 8:15. The room was warm, conversations were loose, and my stepmother stood with the easy confidence of someone who had never once questioned her right to take up space. Tonight is about Carlton, she said, and about legacy, which is family. She looked at my stepbrother, at my stepsister, at Beckford, who was already nodding, his real family, the children who carry his blood. Her eyes found mine for just a moment, long enough. Damon, Giselle, come stand with your father. They stood, the photographer arranged them. My father smiled into the camera. I sat at the table with my hands in my lap and did not move. One of my father's former colleagues leaned toward me and said quietly, "Shouldn't you be in that photo?" I smiled and said, "I'm fine." My voice came out steady, which surprised me, because somewhere under my sternum, I felt like I was dissolving. I stayed 40 minutes longer, hugged my father goodbye, told him I had an early morning. My stepmother didn't walk me to the door. I held myself together through the parking garage and the highway and the elevator up to my apartment. Then I sat down on my kitchen floor, not the couch, the floor, and I let 22 years of trying to belong somewhere that had already decided I didn't fit arrive all at once. Real family, his real family. The words ran on a loop for hours. I didn't sleep much, but by morning something had shifted. The grief had cooled into something harder and much more focused. For 3 days, I worked with a kind of intensity that worried my own staff. My office manager, Annika, who had been with me for 4 years, and understood me the way people who share close quarters for a long time come to understand each other, appeared in my doorway on the 3rd afternoon with 2 coffees, and a look that said she wasn't going anywhere until I talked. I told her everything, the party, the toast, the 22 years before it. When I finished, she set down her coffee very carefully. "You have been their financial safety net," she said, "and they publicly, at a party full of people, told you that you're not real family. Those 2 things happened in the same universe. Do you hear how that sounds?" I heard it. I had been not hearing it for a long time. That night I opened a spreadsheet I hadn't looked at in almost 2 years. The one my accountant had asked me to keep. The numbers were clinical and completely devastating. $60,000 to my father, 0 repayments, loan agreement signed and never honored. $47,000 to my stepbrother, no signed agreement, no payments, not a single mention of it since the last transfer. $19,000 for my stepsister's wedding venue, a gift I had framed to myself as generosity, because calling it what it actually was would have required too much of me. 4 years of lake house mortgage contributions, just over $52,000. Smaller amounts scattered throughout, emergency car repairs, a medical bill, the Christmas calls where my father said things were tight, and could I just this once? $231,000 approximate. I said the number out loud in my empty apartment. Then, my phone buzzed. A text from my stepbrother, no greeting. "Hey, restaurant's in a rough patch. Need $7,500 to cover the supply deposit, or we lose the vendor contract. I know timing is bad. You're the only one I trust with this. I'll pay you back when things stabilize. You know how I am." I read it twice, then I took a screenshot of it. Then I scrolled to the family group chat, where someone had posted a video clip of my stepmother's toast, complete with warm reactions from cousins I'd grown up alongside. I took a screenshot of that too. I set the phone face down on the counter. I stood there in my kitchen for a long moment, very still, the way you get still when you've finally made a decision you'd been avoiding for years. Then I picked up the phone and opened my stepbrother's message. "Since I'm apparently not part of the real family, I think I'll let real family handle this one." I attached the screenshot of the toast. I sent it. I put the phone back on the counter and went to make dinner. By the time I looked at the screen again, There were 16 messages, 9 from my stepbrother, escalating steadily from confusion to anger to something that could only be described as outrage. 3 from my stepsister, 2 from my father, 1 from my stepmother, which read, "This is being taken completely out of context. I think you need to take a breath before you do something you'll regret." I plugged the phone into the charger and went to bed. What followed over the next 48 hours was something I could only describe as a managed detonation. My stepbrother's voicemails were extensive as the condensed version. After everything this family had done for me, this was incredibly immature. Real family didn't operate this way, and would I please stop behaving like a child? He did not mention the $47,000. My stepsister sent an email, 3 paragraphs, carefully written, in which she accused me of weaponizing a sentimental moment at their father's retirement celebration to make the evening about myself. She signed it, disappointedly. My father left a voicemail that was calm but stiff, suggesting I was making something out of nothing, and that Linda had certainly meant no harm. I saved everything and did not respond to any of it. On the 4th day, my father appeared at my office unannounced. He looked tired in a way I recognized, the specific exhaustion of a man trying to manage something he doesn't know how to hold. "You're my daughter," he said. "Of course you're family." "Was I family on Saturday?" I asked, "when Linda asked the real children to come stand with you?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "She didn't mean it the way it sounded." "Dad," I kept my voice level. "She looked at me before she said it. She meant exactly what she said, and you stood between them and smiled for the camera." He was quiet for a moment. He had my mother's eyes, or I had his, depending on how you counted things. Right now they looked tired and honestly a little ashamed, which was more than I'd expected. "The business is struggling," he said. "Linda is under enormous stress. We need—" "Does she know?" I said. "Does Linda know that her mortgage didn't go into default 3 years ago because I wired you $60,000? Does she know her son's restaurant has been partly funded by me since the beginning?" The shift in his expression told me she didn't. "That money was between us," he said carefully. "It was, but the toast was for the whole room." I kept my voice steady. "I've supported this family financially for almost a decade, Dad, and I've never asked for credit or acknowledgement. I just wanted to be included. That's all I've ever wanted, and I was told, publicly, that I don't qualify." He stayed another half hour. He moved through explanations, then justifications, then something close to pleading. He mentioned the lake house mortgage was falling behind. He mentioned my stepbrother's restaurant was about to lose its lease. He mentioned that he and Linda were looking at real consequences if things didn't change soon. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "I'm removing myself from the lake house mortgage. I'll notify the lender this week, and the loan agreement you signed. I'm activating the repayment terms. 30 days to begin, as agreed." He stared at me. "That's not Tilda, we're family." "I know," I said. "That's actually the problem." He left without saying goodbye. That night I wrote an email. I addressed it to my father, my stepmother, my stepbrother, and my stepsister. I laid out, plainly, every financial contribution I had made over the past 8. Amounts, dates, purpose, documentation attached. I closed with this. "I have spent the majority of my adult life trying to earn a place in this family. Last Saturday, I received a clear answer about whether that place was ever available. I'm choosing to take that answer at face value. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing from all shared financial obligations. All outstanding loans are due as specified in the original agreements. I wish you all well." I sent it at 8:52 in the evening. Then I called Annika because she'd asked me to. "How are you?" she said. I thought about it honestly. "Like I've been holding my breath for 22 years, I said, and I just stopped. The response was predictable and exhausting, and I read enough of it to understand I wasn't missing anything. My stepmother's email was long and cold, and framed everything as an attack on her family. My stepbrother called 4 times and left messages I didn't listen to past the first sentence. My stepsister's follow-up email was shorter and ended with the line, "You're really going to do this to Dad?" My father sent one text, "Please reconsider, we're family." I started therapy the following week with a therapist named Dr. Sharp, who worked specifically with adults navigating complicated family systems. In our first session, she said something that has stayed with me. "The grief you're carrying isn't just about what happened at the party. It's for the family you were told you'd have and never quite did. That's a specific kind of loss. The second kind is harder to name, but it's the one that actually heals." 6 weeks after the retirement party, I got a phone call from my father's sister, my Aunt Colleen, who lives in Vermont and had apparently been kept, deliberately, at a distance from most of this. She'd seen the group chat. She was appalled. "That woman has some nerve," she said, in the blunt New England way she had. "You have been a Harmon since the day your daddy brought you home. I don't care what anyone says at any toast, you hear me?" I cried on the phone with her for 11 minutes, which was more than I'd allowed myself through the entire preceding month. Colleen drove down for a weekend 2 months later. We ate well and walked along the waterfront and talked about my mother, which I almost never let myself do. She told me stories I hadn't heard. She told me my mother would have been so proud of what I'd built. She said it without any agenda behind it. which is the only way that sentence actually means anything. It was Colleen who eventually connected me, through a network she knew, to a small group of women who had navigated similar territory, adult daughters from blended or complicated families. People who understood the specific exhaustion of trying to earn belonging, from people who had quietly decided you didn't merit it for free. We started meeting once a month. First over video, then in person, when it turned out 3 of us lived within driving distance of each other. One of the women, Odalys, who had spent 14 years as the unacknowledged financial backbone of a step family that treated her as a courtesy relative, said something in one of our early meetings that I wrote down. The money was never really the point. The money was what we gave instead of our hearts. Because our hearts kept being handed back. I still have that written on a post-it on my desk. The consequences for the family unfolded more or less the way I expected. The lake house sold in November, several months after I notified the lender. My stepbrother's restaurant closed 6 weeks after that. He is, last I heard, living back at home while he reassesses. My stepsister and Beckford are insulated by his family's money, which was always the cushion the rest of them lacked. My father's contracting business entered a restructuring arrangement. Not bankruptcy, but close enough that the word got said in a room with lawyers present. My father called twice in the months that followed. The first time he talked around the subject suggested we start fresh. Didn't name anything specific he was starting fresh from. I said I needed more time. The second call, a few weeks later, was different. He said he missed me. He said he knew he'd failed me in ways he wasn't proud of. He didn't attach anything to it. No ask, no negotiation, no pivot toward what he needed. He just said it. That call was the first time in my adult life. My father said something to me that wasn't accompanied by an ask. It mattered. I told him it mattered. We're in careful, early contact now. A few phone calls. One lunch. I'm not rushing any of it. Some things, when they've been strained long enough, don't return to what they were. They either become something new or they don't. We're still finding out which kind this is. With my stepmother, my stepbrother, and my stepsister, silence. No anger, no open wound. That chapter is simply closed, the way a door closes when you finally stop holding it open. Last autumn I hosted what Annika started calling my real family dinner, which sounds more sentimental than it actually was. It was just dinner. Annika and her husband, Aunt Colleen, who drove down from Vermont with jam and wine, Odalys and one other woman from our group, a friend I'd made through a community fundraiser, someone whose name I'd known for 6 months before I understood she was someone I genuinely wanted in my life. We ate at my dining room table. Someone brought flowers, someone else brought dessert. We stayed until after midnight. At some point Colleen raised her glass and said, simply, to family. Nobody had to define what that word meant. Everyone already knew. I've been in therapy long enough now to have moved past the worst of it. The cycling questions, the replaying, the arithmetic of what I could have done differently, or earlier, or better. Dr. Sharp helped me understand that those were never the right questions. The right question was simpler and harder. What do you want your life to look like from here? I have a clearer answer to that now than I ever have. My consultancy has grown. I have a team I trust and work that engages me. I bought a small house last spring. 2 bedrooms, a yard with a magnolia tree that blooms in April's, neighbors who wave. I am not lonely in the way I used to be. That particular loneliness. The kind that lives underneath a full life and makes everything feel faintly hollow. I think it came from spending so many years directing my energy toward a place that had already decided it didn't want me. When I finally stopped trying to belong there, that ache began to ease in a way I hadn't believed it could. I'm telling you this because I think a lot of people listening right now know exactly what I'm describing. The slow, quiet math of giving more than you receive and calling it love. The way you keep telling yourself that the next occasion, the next holiday, the next birthday, the next party, will be the one where something shifts. And then the occasion comes, and you're watching from the edge of someone else's photograph. If that's where you are, the boundary you've been afraid to draw is not the cruel thing. What you've been living inside of is. You don't have to earn the right to be counted. You never did. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to step back from a family that was costing you more than you ever said out loud? What finally made it clear to you? I read every single comment. Whatever you're carrying tonight, you are not alone in it.